With 2022 behind us, I'm sure a lot of us are looking ahead to 2023 and wondering just what is coming next for Planetside 2. I know I have been. And while we've already heard some news as to what's on the horizon with talks of construction in particular, which we will be doing a video for separately, I have to be real, I think this could be a very important year for Planetside 2, especially regarding its lifespan going forward. G'day there once again viewers, your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today we're going to talk about the current state of the game and the hurdles that Planetside 2 needs to address in 2023. Before we get too far into this video, yes, I do sound a bit nasally at the moment. Somehow I've managed to start coughing up a lung and I've got a snuffling nose in the middle of an Australian summer. Yeah, look, I feel like it's a personal attack as well, don't worry. But anyway, back on topic, a lot has happened this year for Planetside 2. We saw numerous large-scale content updates, the return of Outfit Wars, and the game celebrated its 10-year anniversary, which is a feat that not many games tend to reach nowadays. In more detail, we saw OSHA release, we saw the Arsenal update, we saw naval combat make its way into the game somewhat properly, we saw a new mechanic for capturing bases thanks to the Capture the Conduit system, and a graphics overhaul for the game. These are of course just some of the more quote-unquote headline entries to have come from this past year alone, which when you look at it all from afar sounds relatively impressive. I know there are some significant bodies of work here for a dev team that is only 30-ish people strong. That number may have changed since last I knew, but who knows. But when you log into the game across most servers nowadays, you're welcomed by a pretty miserable sight as far as the player population is concerned for the most part. If you look at the population charts for the PC side of this game globally for the last 30 days, the game is currently sitting at an average player count of 1,597 players with a peak of 3,485 players. Those are the lowest average player counts we have seen in the holiday period 4 years. Now, comparatively against 2019, we have had higher peak player counts, but our average player count is down and is the lowest it has been in a holiday period since 2019. So let's take a look at a couple of the updates through the year and see what we can learn and see what's going on here. The release of OSHA at the start of the year saw a small bump in the average player count to 2,150 players for January. Not a bad jump for the short term, but then we saw the player count return to its pre-OSHA levels just 2 months after. We also had the Surf and Storm update in July, which saw an improvement to the peak player count of the game for the month of July, but we saw a near negligible improvement in average player counts, only plus 78 from the last month. But what may surprise you is that the most successful update to actually arrive to the game in 2022 arrived at the end of March. It wasn't the 10-year anniversary update, it wasn't Outfit Wars, it was the Arsenal update. The update that focused primarily on retrofitting the infantry aspect of this game and tried to give new life to the field of combat that determines the outcome of 99% of the fights in this game. That was the most successful update of the year. The game's average player count grew by 869 players in April, with a peak player count of 5,654 players. For reference, not a single update to the game through the course of 2021 was as successful as capturing players and getting them to stick around for the course of a month. The update got the attention of the current, returning, and new player base out there, and it maintained that attention relatively well. Now yes, the 10-year anniversary update in November brought the game its biggest peak player count of the year, that being 6,319 players, which is no small feat given that the peak was only 3,481 players the months prior. But on the flip side, the average player count for November was 1,842, a difference of 1,000 players on the average lifespan against the Arsenal update. That is a difference of night and day when it comes to player retention holding. Why am I telling you all this? Why are we focusing so much on player numbers and update correlation in a video that's meant to be talking about the future? Well, it's quite simple, ladies and gentlemen. To me, it tells a really strong narrative. A narrative that should seriously drive this game's direction going forward. And it says that Planetside 2 players are most interested in updates that improve the core experience instead of just adding more to the game, and that this game's population troubles are not born from a lack of advertising or a lack of interest, but instead are born from a lacking ability to captivate new players in the first place and keep them maintained for the long run. A lot of 2022 was focused on new experiences in Planetside 2. You know, a new continent, a new field of war with water combat, a new competitive league mode, new graphics, a new base capture mechanic, new tank weapons, the works. There was a lot of new this year, all of which is cool and is nice to have on paper, but the Arsenal update is what kept players sticking around the longest. Now yes, it had a lot of new in it as well, but the big difference between the Arsenal update and every other major update this year is that the Arsenal update aimed to at least somewhat address some of the game's biggest problems from an FPS player's concern. And on top of that, it also wasn't fixing problems that were only added by recent additions to the game. It was the only update that went back and addressed some of the biggest long-standing issues that were in the game from day one. It was the catalyst for the effective removal of nanoweave armor from the game, which albeit brought about its own set of issues, but also improved time to kill consistency in automatic weapons. It narrowed and tightened up weapon balance in some places. It, as an update, focused on making the first-person shooter element of the game just that little bit more cohesive in a lot of places. All these updates where quote-unquote new and shiny things acted as the forefront all fell short when it came to capturing players' attentions for the long run. OSHA and the corresponding OSHA 2.0 aka Surf and Storm update are key examples of this. Sure, OSHA was new and it ticked a box for a lot of players that they hadn't had a chance to experience in the game in a long time, but after some extended playtime on it, they got bored of it real quick and drew some issues with it. Same thing with the Surf and Storm update that brought about the Corsair watercraft. Yeah, sure, when it first came out, that boat was the hottest thing to have ever landed on Araxis, and everyone wanted to use it on OSHA for a little bit of time. But I challenge you all to think back to the last time you saw a Corsair water battle. I don't think it's happened since July, for me personally. The point I'm making is that while yes, all of these new and shiny things came through and added to the game, they fell short in capturing players' attention for the long run, and the reason for that is because the underlying core experience of Planetside 2 still has so many bloody gaps that keeps driving new players away. I still stand by the fact that the most efficient way to win at Planetside 2 is to ensure that you don't actually fight in Planetside 2. You and your squad, your platoon, whatever the case may be, are best rewarded in the context of the game's objective by ensuring your opponents don't even have the chance to fight back. If this is sounding a bit like a broken record for me, then, well, it's because it is. This is a continuation of what I said in my one gripe video a few months back, but I'm willing to bet my bottom dollar that the majority of players who come to this game are seeking a first-person shooter game above all else. The setting of being a sci-fi MMO is all well and good, but they are seeking a first-person shooter game first and foremost, and the quintessential, pillar of a first-person shooter game is that challenge of you versus another player, and that back and forth of engagement. So when the first person shooter side of the game puts you in a situation where a big old force has 12 max suits, 6 air-to-ground ESFs, and a galaxy with bulldogs shelling your spawn room with another 48 people on the other side of the door with gun barrels pointed toward you to obliterate you the moment you try to start a fight, do we really think that new player is going to be having a good time there? Are they really going to be looking at that first impression of the game and going, wow, this is really worth my time? No, of course they aren't. So as long as that experience is encouraged by the core of the game to achieve the most efficient result and continues to be highly likely to occur, the game will always have problems with capturing the attention of newer players that no amount of new and shiny content can fix. Which is why I truly believe that for Planetside 2 to continue living a long and healthy life, we need to go back to the basics and start looking at how the core gameplay right now is likely driving a lot of potential new long-standing community members away from this game. This comes down to addressing some of the hard problems, such as the max suit currently and how the effort required to take one down in a fight doesn't even come close to reflecting how easy it is to chain pull one constantly and do well in it. The vehicle metagame and how the entire vehicle side of this game boils down to merely smoking infantry at every opportunity you get to artificially ramp up that KPM because, well, there isn't any other vehicle objectives in the game. The fact that currently infantry weapons that counter vehicles directly are countering vehicles vehicles in the wrong ways. That being lock-on launchers that are primarily effective in engaging air-to-air dogfighters, but are less effective at effectively engaging good air-to-ground pilots. And also, dumb fire launchers having lacking velocity that makes engaging tanks that are shooting you from a distance nothing but a chore and, quite frankly, a fruitless one at that. The fact that the game advertises grand-scale warfare and large-scale fights, yet these battles take place almost exclusively in 5x8 meter rooms with little to no wiggle room and opportunity for players to have a meaningful impact. See that doorway? Yep, get ready to start shooting at its hinges. And one more time, as I said before, the fact that the game is best won by completely ignoring the first-person shooter side of the game and just capturing the map by circumventing that FPS element by not allowing a fight to take place at all. These are all complex, conceptual, and multi-stage issues that I'm sure will take multiple updates to work out, some of which will require work independently from that of another issue that's in the game, and some may require some revisiting of integral systems to the game. Stuff like the resource system, core weapon design, the spawn system, overall base design, all of these things require work to get the game to where it possibly could be in the long run. But as I said before, this is no easy feat. Hell, I'd even go as far to say, and I know I'm going to cop some flack for this, but hear me out, after a lot of the other things are sorted out first, construction could very well be a part of this game's meta if it was implemented properly, which right now it isn't. Right now it's just this big, fortress building simulator that one player can whip up that is filled to the brim with AI turrets and is not fun to fight against for anyone involved. Construction could very well find itself being a part of the vehicle meta in a certain way, but again, that requires work on other elements of the game alongside it or beforehand to take place. And I get it, these probably aren't the most attractive game updates to work on from the perspective of advertising and building hype for the game. New and shiny is always going to get more butts in seats early on, but the proof is in the pudding. We can keep adding more new stuff to this game over and over again, but the status quo is not going to change until we start addressing some of the core frustrations that this game has. Hell, this even comes down to addressing server issues that the game constantly finds itself running into. Marketing and new player outreach is not this game's problem and is not the reason for its dwindling population. This is a fallacy that many in the community constantly fall on. It's the fact that the game is just so damn frustrating unless you stumble across a situation where you're allowed to have a good fight, which doesn't happen more often than not. And I know that some will say that a lot of these issues are circumvented by the act of finding an outfit or squatting up with players and just doing the same thing that this game does, but doing it with people and playing for the map. And there's some truth to be said for that, but I'm gonna drop an incredibly hot take on people here as a final closing thought to this video as to why this mindset is limiting Planetside 2's possibilities. If a game is entirely dependent on you having mates to play it with for it to be fun, then it's not the game that's the fun part. It's the mates you have with you that are making the game fun. Now, of course, there are going to be exceptions to this rule. There are some games that you just cannot play solo by design, and I understand that. But I stand by the opinion that if a game, especially a first-person shooter game that isn't like a milsim, doesn't have a solid enough groundwork to the point where you need to rely on banter with your mates to make the game enjoyable, then the game is doing nothing more than acting as your meeting place for you and your mates. Maybe it's the one game you all own, or maybe it's the one game that everyone's system can support, or maybe it genuinely is the game that as a group you feel like you can accomplish the most in together, whether this be by your experience with the game or your, skill level and the skill curve of the title you're playing. But nonetheless, I would still argue that this isn't necessarily a merit to the game itself. Every game that I know of is more fun with friends. Planetside 2 certainly leans on this. But I don't think it should be the excuse that sees us turn a blind eye from addressing some of the frustrations that stop new players from sticking around at a solo level. Yes, everyone can get into a squad, platoon, outfit, whatever. The mechanics are available to all out of the gate. It's not locked behind a microtransaction or anything. But I guarantee you that the majority of players checking out Planetside 2 out of curiosity are going to encounter those frustrations as a first impression and just not see it worthwhile to build those relationships to make the game fun when the core game is driving them up the wall constantly. The mechanics of the game, the skill curve presented to the play in the game, the opportunity for success in the game at a solo level should be a key pillar in driving a player to keep coming back. You can have that social aspect there as well, but by leaning entirely on it, you certainly alienate a significant portion of your community, and it leads to games that are mechanically immature. I appreciate the need for shiny and new content, trust me I do, but I really hope we take a step back this year and really take the time to address the core gameplay loop in a way that makes it a much better experience. But folks, I've been coughing up a lung throughout this commentary, so I'm going to leave you guys with that there. Those are my thoughts as to where the priorities should lie for Planetside 2 this year. I'd be interested in hearing all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to backhand the like button, as it does go a long way to supporting the channel. And if you're new here, consider backhanding that subscribe button whilst you're at it to stay up to date with more videos. Once again guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Take care guys, have a good one.